Right, so I got my box of hose and stuff out now, so we're making a start on some plumbing. Decided to start with the fuel system, so we put the rail and the injectors and stuff in that last video. So I'm underneath the car now putting the fuel tank back in. So now that we've adapted it so we can connect the hoses in, just hooking up all the breathers and vents and stuff. This tank was actually slightly modified before when it had the diesel in it, because it was dropped down a tad. Can't actually remember what the reason for that was, but I think there was something that ran on top of the tank or something and it didn't fit. So we're going to do away with that now, because whatever it was is gone now. It's basically a spacer on all the mounts, so I'm going to do away with that now and hopefully bolt the tank right back up flush where it's supposed to be. And we should be able to follow the factory. There's a dint in the tank where the original lines come down, so we should be able to follow that to keep those lines tucked in. And it's just a lot easier to, well, you've got to hook all this stuff up now before you put the tank back up into the final position. So I've just got it resting on transmission jack there while we hook up the fuel hose and those tubes in the top. And also just make sure that the wires are tucked into the right places, or else you're going to try and cut your hands open, feeding your hands down through those holes to get the cables in the right place. So I'm going to hook that up in position, put the brackets on and bolt it in, and then we're going to run the lines forward from the back. We've got a little fuel filter, inline fuel filter to go here somewhere. I was thinking it was going to go back here, but I'm not. It could go up in the engine bay. I haven't actually decided yet, but I wanted to put it back here if we could. Right, okay, I've got as far as I can with those fuel lines for a second. I've run out of rib nuts to bring the brackets up to the front, so I'm going to have to stop that for a minute. So I'm just looking at doing the oil lines now for the turbo. So we're going to start with the high pressure feed to it. So on the back of the engine, there's an 8th BSP thread, which is where the factory oil pressure switch went. So I've taken that out. I've got a 8th BSP to AN adapter with a Doughty washer on it. The switch was tapered before, but obviously we'll run that right in and seal it up against the flat. So we'll run a hose down around the back, then out the way of the exhaust up to the turbo, and then in line I'll have a gauge sender so we can put our oil pressure sensor, which will be inputted into the ECU. So I'll screw that fit in the block first, then screw that on, and we can have a 90-degree fitting off there, make the hose to length and come in the top of the turbo. Right, just still working on the throttle cable this afternoon. Still waiting for some parts from other bits and pieces. So I managed to source another original phase 1 pedal, because that was all pulled out of this car. Because when the HDI was in here, Sam had obviously the fly-by-wire style throttle pedal, so the original pedal was all pulled out. So we've put that back in, robbed the throttle cable, got that fitted up in there. So everything inside the car is basically factory. So we're just figuring out where we're going to mount it. So I got the original bracket here, which I've cut. It used to come up here somewhere. I've cut all that off just so we can use it to save drilling some holes to pick up those 2 holes in the throttle body there. And then we're going to cut, well, probably section it here, drill a hole so it'll accept the grommet that the adjustment sleeve fits in, and then hopefully we can slot that in there, use the original R-clip, and hopefully have it looking fairly factory. The only question then will be whether we got the same travel on the pedal as we do on the throttle body. And if we don't, we'll have to adjust obviously the length of the throttle pedal to make it correct, because obviously if we don't get full throttle, that's no good. And likewise, if it's too much travel, that's not ideal either. Although if it's close, we can probably just put a throttle pedal stop in. Looking at it, I don't reckon it's actually going to be too far off, but I'm going to take this off now anyway. We're going to cut a piece out here, and we'll weld on that flange so that we can accept the throttle pedal. Right, so that's made that little bracket for the throttle cable. So that bolts onto the throttle body in the factory location, and then that will accept like a factory Peugeot throttle cable grommet, which will hold the throttle cable with like the AR clip, so you've still got adjustment over the cable. So I'll put some paint on that now and we can bolt it up. Okay, so this is the little bracket that we've ended up making up to pick up the throttle cable. So that will just accept that rubber grommet out the Peugeot, and it'll just bolt up to the throttle body over here, hopefully. That'll be now. Right, we can still adjust the tension of the cable using that factory clip in there. So now, in theory, I'll use the throttle. Hopefully that was the throttle. And what I do just need to do though is set this up somewhere so that I can just make sure we're getting maximum travel. Might be that we need to adjust the position of the cable, sort of the length of it between the pivot point and where the cable attaches on the pedal, if we need a bit more or a bit less travel. So set you up here. I'll try to. Not quite as easy as I thought. Like that. Watch us jump under the box and punch it from. That's the pedal on the floor now. Yeah, and as you can see, it's maxed out. So that's wide open throttle. We're on the stop there. So that's good news. Okay, so throttle cable sorted now. Vacuum line for the brakes is in. I'm sorting out the oil lines for the turbo. So we've got a -4 line coming up as your feed, -10 for return. I'll show you underneath in a minute, but that's basically connected in where the factory oil pressure switch goes. And then this one's going into that bung we had welded in the sump. So I've just got the turbo loose at the moment. This one needs clocking obviously anyway. Just makes it a lot easier to access the drain. So obviously this is the drain at the top. So I've just fitted that -10 flanged fitting to there. If we come around the other side, I think we've got it's M12 by 1.25, I think, from memory. So I'll stick an adapter in there a minute. Right, okay, so that's the 2 oil lines on the turbo. So you've got the feed in the top there and the return out the bottom. Just got a clip there to hold that back away from the hot side a little bit. That then routes down in underneath where I showed you earlier. And made a little bracket here for the MAC valve, so that's for the external wastegate or for your boost control. It gets a boost source. We're going to tap the bottom of the manifold down there. We haven't done that yet. I've just got some heater hose laid in here because I was just measuring up for that. I think that will probably work. We can come around there, avoid the exhaust. I think we're still planning on heat wrapping that anyway. And we come underneath it and then up in from the bottom, just in behind the wastegate there. You can see we got the 2 heater hoses there. Throttle cable, I think we showed that before. That's all done. Got that secured over there. That runs quite nicely around the top. We obviously haven't tidied it up yet. Try and tidy all that at once. We'll put some P-clips and we'll put some riv nuts and stuff in the bulkhead to get all that nice and tidy. Just while I'm down in this area, I thought I'd just quickly make up a ground strap because that's easily forgotten, and then you finish the whole project and wonder why nothing's working properly. So I've got to remember to reconnect that. That's the chassis ground for the vehicle wiring. So I've just shone up that ground point there, and we've shone up. I think this is what used to mount the hydraulic slave cylinder, so I'm going to use that as a ground there. So we're just going to come over and make up a cable for that. So we've got a 8mm stud that end, 10mm stud this end. So I've got my tray of battery terminals out. I'm just doing it in the vise as soon as we can because it's a bit easier. So we've got some cable there with a stub on the end. So we'll crimp that end, take it back to the car, just quickly bang a bolt in there, measure the length of the cable, cut it, come back and crimp the other end. Right, so that cable will sit around about there. I'm going to route it in behind and just ground the transmission over here. Obviously the gearbox is bolted to the engine, so that will then ground the whole engine. Right, so we've got that ground strap mounted now. That's got the engine earthed. The battery's in the boot of this one, and obviously that's earthed back there. Right, so I think the next thing is going to be to finalise these heater hoses. I want to clip them back on the bulkhead, right back out the way, and then swoop them in underneath, like I said before. So we're going to get some P-clips and some riv nuts and mount them across there like that.